Hello, stream. If you are just joining and you're watching the replay, you want to fast forward about 15 minutes and we'll get things started. Otherwise, I think we're just about ready. Just about. I need to listen in. That would be nice. Confirm that it actually works. Let's try it out and see what it sounds like. Push a button. Let's turn this down some. Fast forward about 15 minutes and we'll get things started. It sounds pretty good. I'll take that audio. That's nice. Okay. Let's stick some things in here. If you are watching this live, I'm monitoring the chat on the Professor Messer website. So if you're watching this on the YouTube website, you won't see that. You'd have to go to any page on Professor Messer, ideally professormesser.com/live. Change the text on the banner at the top of the website so people know where to go. And I think we are in good shape. Nope, there is no catching of the raccoon. Or raccoons. There were many of them. They have a mind and a world of their own. What would I catch them? I catch them and then what do I do? Therein lies the problem. All right, things seem to be working there. Let's see if we're getting people in. We are. Quite a few of you are on and watching. Okay, let's do a camera check. That's pretty good. That's not bad. This is this. That is that. And my little head popping up. Okay. See, that's pretty good. That's pretty good. What else? Remind me to start the recording. That's kind of it. It's kind of working this time. Last time we were having some problems on the Network Plus study group last month. Some problems. Made me want to throw YouTube away. And I may still do that, but here we are for the moment. There have been many creatures wandering around. There's deer. There is a flying squirrel. There's a fox squirrel. There is, of course, the raccoons. We're always seeing something wandering around. There's owls. There's eagles. There's all kinds of things. All right. Oh, I didn't check the this one. No. The heck is that? That's a problem. That's not what you want. That is not what you want. That's an issue. Let's adjust that, shall we? It's not quite the same. Let's try that again. Yeah, it's close enough. It's close enough. We will do that. Time-wise, I don't have the little countdown timer I used to have. I have to pay attention now, which is not exactly what I'm shooting for. Not big on the paying attention part. You want to get in for the quiz, you got plenty of time, but it's Socrative, Socrative, Socrative.com, and the room name is Professor Messer. You want to log in as a student or connect as a student. You don't have to log in on anything, or download an app for your phone that is the student app, and you can do that. Yes, my studio is at my house, so the commute is pretty awesome. Director. Ha! Do you see anyone else in the studio? There's nobody here but me. There's no directors. There's no producers. There's no executive producers. There's no grip. There's no best boy. There is no audio. There's no cinematography. Just me. But these days, you got everything. You've got audio over here. You got video over here. I should show you what I see on the video. I have to flip things over for you to see this. Let's see if I can do this without breaking something. So if I wanted to show you, right now you're looking at that here, and that's 4. This is what I see right here. So it's a little different than your... So that's the video. That's all set up, and that gets everything going there. And makes it easy. Audio, video. You click a button, showing a presentation, controlling the presentation, watching the chat, showing you information on the screen here. I guess I could even start the quiz for you people that are logging on. It'll be a teacher-paced quiz. Student feedback. We're going to turn that off this time. I wonder what will happen if I turn that on. Let's find out. Let's just start it. So those of you that are already in Socrative, you can go ahead and you can start answering. You'll see things popping up like this. No, not like that. Like this. Like that. Oh, I should see it on mine too. Oh, I need to put my name. Last comma first. Messer comma Professor. So that's what you will see. And this is what I will see. Just like that. For those of you just joining us, you can go to Socrative.com. Or you can load the Student Socrative app on your mobile device from the Apple Store, Google Play, or the Microsoft, whatever they call it. The name of the room is Professor Messer. Professor Messer. Need to clean up my cables. I ran some new cables over the week. Well, we're not done with that yet, so I will be doing that shortly. Most of them are cleaned up. But I have more cables to run. There's more video to run. I've got a recording system I need to add down on the right side in here. Probably a couple of recording systems. Get those going. I need more storage. There's plenty more to do. There's always something. Okay, there goes the tweet / email / Google Plus. Well, the notification just went out 5 minutes beforehand, so 15 seconds ago. So That is the notification that you will get. No reason to tell you 10 minutes. We haven't started, so you didn't miss anything. It hasn't actually begun yet. I haven't actually done anything. Test. Okay. Okay, all of this seems to be working. Seems to be anyway. There's oddness going on there. Yeah, it's a few minutes before we get going. It's kind of boring, isn't it? What in the world am I doing here? Certainly should get his act together. Need to set that up. I have other things here to set up. I have things here that I'm not using. Get rid of that. I mentioned earlier in the chat, this is my opportunity to clean up my desk because there's usually piles of things that are scattered around. But you can see behind my laptop, there's just nothing back there. There's nothing on the desk back there. That's not normal. That's not a normal week for me. There's usually plenty of stuff on there. But now it's hidden off. It's way over there. Gives me a chance to file everything away properly. I should do more live events, and that way things would be cleaner around here. Okay, I'm going to start the recording when I get to the splash. So that will just be how we do it. All right. Thanks for joining, everyone. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can follow along with the chat that is on the Professor Messer website because I believe I've disabled the chat on YouTube. So if you go to professormesser.com/live, you can not only watch it live, but have chat on the screen at the same time or pop it out as a new window or all of those things. Yes, I always slide a World of Warcraft reference or Stargate reference into my videos somewhere. Keeps me a little bit more sane. My Windows course had a lot of Stargate references, the Windows 7 course. It ran on the SGC domain, and all the usernames were members of the team. That's it. Okay, we are just about ready to get going. Just a moment, just a second, just a thing. How am I looking here? Pretty good. All right. Okay. This is great. Yes, I've used the Rodney McKay login so much that people will send me emails calling me Rodney because they think that's my login. I just go with it. Sure. Why not? Alliance or Horde? Horde on Earthen Ring in the AIE, one of the AIE guilds. Hey, it's 12 noon. It's time to do something. Let's finally, let's do this. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the February 2015 A+ Study Group, our live event where myself, James Messer, and you get together and answer questions on the Professor Messer website. This is one of those times where I get to take all the questions that you've sent me throughout the month, and I get to put them into a format where we can go through and I'll ask you questions like a pop quiz, and then you will answer them. You can follow along online, and I'll tell you all about doing that whenever we get to that part of this introduction. This is quite a bit of content that I've put together just for the A+. If you're studying for your A+, I've got videos you can watch online for everything. Every topic that is in the exam objectives, you can watch them on my website at professormesser.com. There's links at the top for all of my courses, and you can watch them on YouTube as well. So everything is there and free and available for you to watch 24/7. Now, if you're away from the internet, I don't know why anyone would want to do that, but some people apparently do. And if you are away from the internet, you'd like to take my videos with you, I also make those available for sale. So you can take those videos both even in a video form or in a audio form. Maybe you're driving in your car and you just want to listen to that on your way to work and back. You can find out more about that on my website as well. Everything is shipped to you in this neat little flash drive, so very easy to plug into practically anything. There is a studio line. I'll be taking your phone calls later on. Don't call in yet because all you'll get is a recording. If you're watching this on the replay, you can always call in on the studio line as well at 855-785-RJ45 and leave a message there if you'd like to. And that's 24/7. It's not going to ring or bother us in the studio. If it's on that mode, you can simply leave a message in the cloud, and I'll be able to download that. So if you'd like me to play your message later on in the next study group, you can't make it live, that's a good way to do it. And later on, I'll tell you when we have those phone lines open, you can call in live today. If you'd like to support what we're doing here, interestingly enough, these free videos on YouTube are nice to have, but I am able to communicate with the folks at Google and at YouTube a lot better if they recognize that people are watching the videos, and a great way to do that is for you to subscribe. So you don't have to buy anything on my site, but I do ask if you are going to watch those. It helps me a lot if you would consider subscribing. You can find out more about that at professormesser.com/subscribe. That's subscribing to my YouTube channel. It doesn't cost anything. You can click a button and unsubscribe. I don't send out any announcements or things. I'm not going to bother you with that piece. Just having the numbers there, it's remarkable how important that is to the folks at Google. You can also follow what we're doing on Twitter, and you can see what's happening there at professormesser.com/Twitter. And for those of you that are ready to take your exam, you can save money right off the bat, a 10% discount on your vouchers at professormesser.com/vouchers. So there's quite a bit there. So if you're watching us also live, make sure you get to the website. Any of those pages on the website, like professormesser.com/live, will also bring up a chat. We can talk about that as well. And I'm watching the chat go by, watching everybody send the comments into the chat room and popping it out and seeing how it works. There's a lot of you in there today. Thanks for joining us. It's good to have you here. If you are someone who already has your A+ certification and you're watching this so that you can get continuing education units, you can find out more about that on the CompTIA website, or just go to that Google machine and type in CompTIA Continuing Education Units, or CEUs, and you can find out more about that. Somewhere within this hour, I will give you a secret code that you can send to me, and I'll just send you back an email certification that says, wow, you know the secret code. You must have watched this entire hour of content. And why wouldn't you? It's just so good to do that. I mentioned my course being available. You can grab that and have a look at the page at professormesser.com/downloadable-A+. There's audio with that. My slides are in PDF format with that. Everything is transcribed. There's closed captions on everything. You'll notice if you're even on YouTube, the closed captioning is not that YouTube automated closed captioning. It is a real person who sat down and transcribed this and closed captioned it with all the proper timing and everything else. So you will see that on YouTube, and I also include those in my offline versions of videos as well. Well, today you're going to follow along with me. I'm going to ask you questions and you're going to answer them, and I will see what your answers are. Not individually, but I'll be able to see overall what your answers might be. I even have a question up for you right now, and you can get to that question by either popping open a new window and going to Socrative.com. You can go there and type in to connect as a student. It will ask perhaps for your name. You can put your real name in or even a fake name, and you can put in the room name, Professor Messer. That will get you to the proper room. That's Professor Messer. Make sure it's spelled properly as well. There's also an app for your mobile device. So if you have an Android device, an iOS device, and a Windows device, all of those have separate applications that you can download. Download the student version of the app and connect to the Professor Messer room. So there's quite a bit of options there and available. And the reason I give that there is because I ask questions of you like this one. How long have you been studying for your A+ certification? What's nice about having that there is I'm able to see in real time what you answer with that. Here, for instance, is how we've been answering so far. So as people have connected in and logged in and had these pieces here, you will see interactively on the screen, I'll be able to see what you answer there. So as I'm asking other perhaps harder questions of you today, you'll be able to go into this and I'll be able to see how we are doing. Notice a lot of us, I think, have just sort of started this whole process of the studying. Many of you less than 3 months. So maybe half of you here who are answering have been somewhere in the first 6 months of your studies. Others like me take much longer to be able to study for something. So it may be even more than 9 months. And a large chunk of you have already got your A+ certification and you're just joining along for the hijinks. And maybe there will be some of that this time. We'll have to see. There is a lot going on with the A+ exam. We're sort of in the middle of the A+ exam. We get new versions of the A+ about every 3 years or so. And those every 3-year updates give us new versions of the exam. Now, of course, CompTIA could update their certification at any time. They can add new topics and new items to the exam objectives, but they generally don't do that. In fact, for the 800 series, they haven't changed it at all. And they've even said on Facebook recently that they expect to have a new version of the exam out probably near the end of this year, end of summer, beginning of fall, somewhere in that time frame. And you'll probably have, like they've done with the Network Plus, you'll have 6 months before you can even have to worry about that retiring. So you might still be able to take the 800 series exam at this time next year. You might have a very long ramp if you're studying. They never change it and then cut you off because you've been studying, you've been trying to get through this. And if they just changed everything overnight, you'd have to restart with all your studying efforts, and that doesn't make any sense at all. So they do give you plenty of time. And you can see the different topics. We're going to go through different topics from the 801 and the 802 today so that you'll get kind of a smattering of each. I try to mix them up so that you can get all of them on here and be able to step through those pieces. So don't worry about the A+ going away. You have plenty of time right now. It's a very common question that I get whenever you're on your these comments and these messages and these questions that come in. So let's now go to the question. Now that we've seen, here's how this voting system works so that you can try it yourself and answer these questions. I'm going to change the voting system so that we're going to go to the next question. And here it is. In which of these situations would you be most likely to modify the configuration of your BIOS? So there's a couple things you have to know right offhand. You have to know what a BIOS is. You have to know what's in a BIOS, and you have to know why you would change a configuration of a BIOS. It's one of those things that you really have to jump into and try to get a feel for right away. This is directly from the A+ certification at the very beginning of the 220-801 is all about the BIOS and the exam objectives. And if you haven't downloaded those exam objectives, make sure you do. So to see the answers, you can go to Socrative.com or, of course, use that app we talked about. Go to the Professor Messer room, and here's what you'll see. You have the option of modifying the default video resolution, disabling the USB ports, adding a new disk partition, updating the video drivers, or preventing the installation of new applications. one of these things is going to give you access to be able to see what's going on. So this is where it gets really challenging as I step through these questions. I try to make my questions at least two-step. Remember, don't answer in the chat room. Everybody's trying to answer this themselves, of course. So one that I like to do is I like to get a feel for that double step, those extra steps, at least more than one step with a question. So I ask you what something might be, like the BIOS, and then I ask you, how does that work? So it's a really good example of something you have to step through to figure out, what am I looking for? One of the advantages with the A+ certification, I think, is that it gives you an extremely detailed list of what you need to know. It's a very common question I get in the chat room all the time is, what do I need to know for my exam? You have an entire set of exam objectives that are very, very detailed. I think CompTIA does a better job than any other organization that's doing certifications out there, because they give you effectively an entire checklist of everything you need to know. And this is where I pull everything that I do, because it really gives you a nice feel for what your options might be. Again, modifying the BIOS is the option right here. I had a number of people answer. Let's see how we did. I don't think there was much of a question about this one, was there? I think 2% said modify the video resolution. 86% of you said this is where you disable the USB ports. I have a feeling some of you may have disabled the USB ports before. There is adding a disk partition. You would almost always do that from the operating system itself, although if you wanted to be a stickler and say, no, I'm running a hard drive array in a separate controller that has its own BIOS, and the way that you access that RAID controller is through the BIOS in the startup process, then you could possibly be correct there, except that wasn't the question. The question was, in which of these situations would you be most likely to modify the configuration of your BIOS? Changing the configuration of a drive array through the BIOS and adding a new disk partition is not something most likely when you compare it to disabling the USB ports. This is something that you might commonly see on the A+, is there might be multiple questions that could technically be correct, but there's going to be one of those answers that just jumps out at you. It's going to be very obvious. And I think most of us on this particular question figured that one out just right. Updating video drivers is all done in operating system because drivers are operating system dependent. And preventing the installation of new applications, again, is something that is done in the operating system, not the BIOS itself. And the question from the chat room, is it wrong to use a hammer instead of the BIOS to disable the USB ports? I don't know if it would be wrong per se. That's one of those questions that I think is really up in the air. However, I have seen USB physical locks for the USB ports. Let's see if we can find those. Hey, Kensington looks like they have a USB port lock with blockers. Are you kidding me? Thank you, Amazon. Is there anything Amazon doesn't have? Kensington apparently has, and I've seen others as well. I've seen organizations glue in something to block up the interface on it. That would really take care of any problems if you just grab some glue and go with it. I think that's there. So I think if we go back to the answer to that particular question, if we can get rid of that particular piece. Here we go. So the 87%, I think some of you may have hopped on there, would definitely take care of those particular issues. If you look at your BIOS, here's a screenshot I just grabbed from my VMware parallels, or what am I running on here? I'm running my VMware on this. I just took a screenshot of it, and there's different ports available. For instance, this is a good example of some IO port configurations. If you want to enable or disable certain ports, it even tells you enable, disable, or make it automatic when it starts up. They're very simple. And when you disable it in the BIOS, that's it. No operating system is going to be able to re-enable it. The BIOS is effectively your hardware controller. So if you get rid of it in the BIOS, no operating system is even going to see it. This is something that's very common to see in federal government because they don't like people just plugging in flash drives and effectively infecting themselves whenever they do something like that. So one of those things that becomes very useful. Well, I think we did pretty well on that first question. We got through the first one okay. Let's go to the next question. Here we go. When you start your computer, The screen remains blank and it beeps twice. Which of these would be the most likely cause of this issue? By now, you should have even heard that most likely cause pop up, so you'd know what in the world I was talking about there. That should put you on a state of readiness so that you understood what I was asking about. There's a number of options I have available for you. The memory's faulty, the operating system has become corrupted, the PC is infected with malware, the boot device is not connected, or the OS kernel is corrupted. One of these is going to be the reason that the screen remains blank and beeps twice. Now, this is troubleshooting. So for those of you studying for your 220-802, this is that last section of the troubleshooting. So this is directly from that 802 exam. I think that can be pretty useful to work along those lines. I think that there is a lot of opportunity in the exam to sit down and parse through these questions and try to find the right one. You should get to a point with your sample questions that you go through that these are just popping out in front of you. It should be very, very easy to find the one you're looking for and have it immediately float to the surface. This is another question where there might be places, you might be tempted in here to choose 2 or 3 of these different options as a technical possibility. But again, the question was, which of these would be the most likely cause of this issue? And we'll go through what those might be when we start looking at more details of that. This is where you're really getting into challenges. And I think that's where I wanted this particular question to really make you think about what the question is asking. Remember, no answering in the chat room. And somebody in the chat room saying, "Oh yes, this has happened to me before. I've run into." Jonathan says, "Oh, it's happened a dozen times. Happens all the time to me." Well, we've had a number of you answer. Let's see how we did with this particular question. 71% said the memory's faulty, but 24% said the boot device is not connected. So very few of you said the operating system has been corrupted. Nobody said the PC is infected with malware, and very few people said the OS kernel is corrupted. So now we've got this quandary. We've got 2 people here that are two sections here that people have commented on. So we need to figure out which one of these would be the correct one then. Well, let's look at this post process. This is power on self-test. This is when you start your computer, it goes through and begins checking different components of your computer to make sure things are working properly. It's a very broad test. It's not looking at testing individual components of the memory. It's really just making sure you have memory plugged in and that it can do a basic connectivity to it. Oh, yes, you indeed have some memory. Oh, yes, you do have a CPU inside of the system. Yes, video is connected to this device. If you're going to, if something during that post is not working properly, you're going to have a message pop up on the screen. There might be some beeping, or there might be the case where nothing pops up on the screen. This is the challenge you have. What if the video itself was faulty in your computer? It obviously would not show you any video, but the BIOS is configured to beep at you. Maybe a series of beeps, maybe a series of short and long beeps, and every manufacturer's BIOS works a little bit differently. You will need to look at the manufacturer's documentation to determine why that happens to be occurring. So this goes back to the question that we were just talking about, which is, why we were getting this beeping noise. Now, part of the keys to this particular question, let's pop back to that really quick. Turn off my keyboard shortcuts here. Let's go back to this question, which was, when you start your computer, the screen remains blank and beeps twice. Remains blank and beeps twice. So from the 2 options that we seem to have narrowed down, the memory's faulty or the boot device is not connected, the boot device wouldn't cause any problems with video display. You would have a video display working properly that would then tell you on the screen, hey, your boot device is missing. You would get a message there. Now, if the video was faulty, we wouldn't see anything, but that wasn't one of our options. But one of our options was the memory is faulty. If your memory is having a problem, it's not going to be able to put anything on the screen because it needs memory to be able to execute the things that it needs to be able to put on the screen for you. So that's one of those that when you start working with your systems, you start to run into this more and more. So in this particular case, if you answered A, the memory is faulty, you would be absolutely correct. Well done with that. So let's have a look at the next question. Let's keep this party going. And I'll click next so you see it in your devices as well. Which of these technologies would be the best choice for authenticating wireless users to a Radius server? So now we've got some options here. Now we've got a number of things associated, in this particular case, wireless networking we need to think about. So when we get into the 22801 and you're working with networking, this is where this particular question is coming from. You can answer this question by going to ProfessorMesser.com or going to the Socrative page and going to the Professor Messer room to be able to see that. And you've got a number of options here. Which of these technologies would be the best choice for authenticating wireless users to a Radius server? We've got TKIP, we've got AES, we've got 802.1x, we've got WPA, we've got 802.1q. I've kind of shifted the burden on you a little bit because I gave you up at the top your choice for authenticating wireless, and I talked about Radius. I guess you do have to know what a Radius server is to be able to do that. Oh, but I would think by looking at this, it's probably something relating to authentication. It's kind of in the question itself. So if you step through the different authentication options, TKIP, AES, 802.1, WPA, 802.1q, I guess that you could piece out there that now we have to know what each one of these individual things might be. So now I really have to go through and figure out what is TKIP, what is AES, what is 802.1x, what is WPA, and what is 802.1q. And one of these would be the best choice for authenticating wireless users to a Radius server. Again, to answer, you go out to Socrative.com to the Professor Messer room, and you will be able to answer that. Not many people jumping on this one. I think some of you may be Googling and trying to figure out the answer. And before you do, I'm going to show you the answer real quick. So we don't have a clear winner here. We have a mix of different things. Well, I think the TKIP, interestingly, AES and TKIP got a very different number of percentages here, but only 9% of you said it could possibly be TKIP. Only 2% of you said it could be 802.1q. And I don't think 802.1q is even discussed much on the A+ exam. So you may be throwing that out. That is a VLAN and tagging type of technology standard. So that perhaps doesn't do it. But now you got these other three. We're sort of mixed, 30%, 23%, 35%. We have AES, we have 802.1x, we have WPA, and you've probably heard of these technologies because all of them are in some way associated sometimes, and sometimes all the time, with wireless technologies. So we need to break this out a little bit and think about what we're doing with Radius. For those of you that have run a wireless network before in a corporate environment, you know this is a bit of a challenge. You know that you've got this very large wireless network that needs to be available to everyone, but you can't just hand out a single shared password to everybody to get onto the wireless network. It's not like at home. At home, you set up your wireless access point, you configure it with a WPA password, and you tell everybody in your house, hey, the password is password 1. If you need to access the wireless network, it's password 1, and that gets you to the wireless network. Don't use password 1 as a password. That's just an example. So on a corporate network, though, you really can't do that. You just can't go around and telling everybody, hey, to get to the corporate wireless, type in Ninja, and that's the password to get to the corporate wireless. Don't use Ninja either. That's also a bad password. The problem you have in these larger environments is that first, there's a need for more security. The data itself is very important to secure, but just the access to the wireless network becomes a very big security concern as well. And for something like Radius, which is an authentication server, we need some way for people when they hit the wireless network that before they get access, they have to type in their normal login credentials. Every user has a different username. Every user obviously has a password associated with that username. So if you are that user on the wireless corporate network, it will pop open a box that says, before you get access to this wireless network, you have to provide me with your corporate login name and your corporate password. And this technology that is discussed in this particular question, which asks, can't even see the question here, which asks which of these technologies would be the best choice for authenticating wireless users, that's where this kicks in. It is this technology that grabs that username and password, goes and talks to the Radius server, and then reports back this person was authenticated properly or this person was not authenticated properly. And if you answered C for 802.1x, 20% of you would be absolutely correct. AES is a type of encryption standard that is used in WPA, really WPA2 type of encryption. It encrypts data, but it really isn't doing anything along the lines of authentication to a Radius server. And for WPA, that's obviously an encryption type as well. The WPA is encrypting data, but again, it's not talking to a Radius server. It's simply providing the encryption part of this. The actual question is asking you which of these technology would be the best choice for authenticating wireless users to a Radius server. The best choice of all of the ones on this list is going to be 802.1x. So if you are at 20%, you did pretty well with that particular question. Wow, that was a good one. There's a lot going on there with that particular question. I want to take a moment. If you're someone who has been looking through all of these questions, you've gone through all of my videos, you've seen an amazing amount of information that I have in all of these videos, but perhaps you're not one of the people that really does very well with keeping notes and working with keeping track of where those things are. You may want to consider supporting the website by purchasing one of my A+ study guides. These are study guides that I try to fit as much information as possible right into the study guide. It's not designed to replace the videos. It's not designed to replace a book. You still need a really good book, but if you're somebody who needs maybe just a breakdown of information, this might be a good way to look at some of that. I think I have a study guide here. I can give you a feel for what that looks like. Here is the 22801 study guide, for instance. So in fact, we were just talking about BIOS. Here's the BIOS section right at the top, because that's one of the first things you talk about. Motherboard breakdowns, configurations, and what's good or bad about configuration, chipsets, memory types. You may recognize some of these graphics and videos, graphics and text displays as coming directly from my videos, because I grab these parts and pieces, I stick them out, I take pictures of them, I grab licensed pictures that I've licensed so you can see it. All the RAID information is in the study guide, and it goes on and on and on. It's another way to also support what we do with the website. I'm a one-man show. I'm putting together all of these videos. I'm putting them out on my website. The hosting costs to have all of this out there is over $1,000 a month. So this is one of the ways that if you would like to be able to contribute back to what we're doing, I like to have you get something for this effort. So I really don't take people donating. I prefer that you actually get something of value in return. And this is just another way to do it. You can find out more about that study guide at professormesser.com/A+SG. I think some of you have been working in the chat room. You've talked this week about the study guides. I appreciate the feedback from that. Every single course I have has a study guide associated with it. I think it comes in handy and might even help you before you go in and walk into your exam and get those last pieces of information really stuck in your brain exactly where it needs to be. Well, let's move on to another question. We seem to be going pretty well. I think I fooled a number of you with that last question. Please don't be mad. It's part of the way this works. If you don't miss something, you're not going to learn. If you just know everything, then what's the point of even doing that? Actually, if you know everything, the point is you should be taking your exam, I guess. So here's another question right here. There we go. Kind of move these around. There we go. In which of these situations would you make use of UAC? And you'll see that pop up on your screen. If I click the right buttons on my side, you'll be able to see that pop up in your device as well. There is a lot that we work with when we deal with UAC. This is another one of those two-step questions I give you. You have to know what UAC is, and you have to know when you would apply this UAC functionality. This is one of those where it may jump right out at you if you're familiar at all with UAC, or you've ever had to configure UAC. And I would even recommend on your computer that you go in and at least look at these UAC options in There, in one of my videos, I go through and demonstrate how to do that piece of it. But here are the options available for you today. Which of these situations would you make use? Would it be used to prevent write access to a network share? Would it be used to limit applications from making changes to network settings? Would it be configured so that on log on, it always defaults to a particular network printer? Would you use UAC to convert IP addressing from a public address to a private address? Or would you make use of UAC by forcing periodic updates to a Windows domain password? Well, it's got to be one of these. UAC is one of those that if you're using Windows, it's going to be an important technology for you to understand. You can, of course, go to Socrative.com, go to the Professor Messer room, and you'll be able to answer one of those on the screen. This is one of those where you are really getting into and working with how Windows is operating. And I think that if you're doing anything with UAC, you've really gotten into the details of how Windows is operating. In the chat room, I don't have a transcript of these questions and answers, but the video that you're watching, you can replay it anytime, and it will be out and in the archives. I put there's an entire separate category. If you go down the right side of the Professor Messer website, all the categories are there, and the A+ study groups are also right there as a separate category. And of course, I list them at the bottom of the index for the A+ videos as well. It comes in really handy to have those there. Well, let's see how we've answered with UAC. I think we've got another one of these where we're sort of mixed in what we're trying to do. Do we prevent write access to a network share with UAC? 18% of you have said that. 66% of you said this limits applications from making changes to network settings. So which one is it going to be? The login defaulting to a printer, converting public to private IP addressing, and forcing periodic updates. I didn't really get a lot of people answering on that. Is it one of those? And maybe we're just missing the question completely. Let's see. Let's see what UAC is all about. UAC stands for User Account Control. And it is that message that pops up on the screen when you try to install a driver or you try to install an application, and the screen goes dark and it pops up a prompt that tells you, do you want to allow the following program to make changes to this computer? And you get to make a decision. This is obviously something going on in your computer that is it affects the usability of your machine. It is really making a significant change to your computer to have this message pop up on the screen and give you this information. So this might be to limit the ability to install new software. When you install software, it might be prompting this. If you're a standard user, this is one where even if you're trying to use the network or you're trying to change your password, you may get a UAC prompt. Or you may even be able to, when you're installing applications or configuring things like remote desktop, it's a very good example of UAC popping up and kicking in. Or secure desktop is what we call that. If you ever see the UAC pop up, your screen goes dark and this window pops up in the middle of it, and you can't change anything in the back in that dark window back there until you answer this dialog box. Microsoft calls that the secure desktop. It is designed to stop everything with interactive capabilities on that desktop until you're able to answer this question. So that's one of those things that is pretty important from a UAC perspective. So this is really implemented by Microsoft as a security measure, especially since we're so concerned about applications that might be malicious making changes to our computer. And if we look at this, preventing write access to a network share is generally done with permissions. It's done with both network-based permissions and even file system-based permissions. That's not really a UAC functionality. Forcing periodic updates to Windows domain password here at the bottom says 10% of you said that one. Forcing periodic updates would be something associated with your local security policy or even a global security policy in a Windows domain. You have something that runs globally. You configure how security works with those security policies in your operating system. That is not a UAC functionality. On login, defaulting to a particular network printer, it does not have anything to do with UAC. And converting IP addressing from a public address to private address sounds like NAT, doesn't it? Network address translation. That one is not. So if you are one of the 65% of you that said limit applications from making changes to network settings, you'd be absolutely correct. That is the answer, and you did great at selecting that one. I didn't fool very many people with that particular answer. So nice job at going through that piece and getting that particular question. Now, one of the things that I always get questions about every month without fail are printer questions. Printer questions seem to be the bane of our existence. So, of course, I have to put a printer question into the list of things. And this particular printer question is one that deals with laser printing. The question is, which of these laser printing steps ensures that you will not see a ghosted image appear down the page of your output? This is one of those where something's printing and then you see a lighter version of it print later down the page. And maybe even again, you see copies of that original printout sort of ghosted down the page. You might get different versions of that as it's going through. And that has to do with laser printing. It has to do with a very specific function of the laser printer that's causing this ghosting to occur. So you need to be able to break that down and see what that might be associated with it. And if you'd like to answer this particular question, you can go to Socrative.com to the Professor Messer room, and you'll be able to answer that piece. Now, in this particular case, the answer is going to be one of the many different options for laser printers. I spared no expense. I added every single one of them. So that is one of those where when you're working with it, you're trying to get those things properly done. You want to be able to pick out which one of those and trying to figure out which one of those pieces that you want to work with. You can find out more here on the Socrative.com. Go to the Professor Messer page and being able to work with that. I think, again, no answering in the chat room. Why do I have to keep saying this? I'm going to have to start telling people not to show up. Don't do that. Don't send that in there. And yes, although exposing, developing, charging, fusing, transferring, and processing are spelled properly, clearing is not clearing. So just assume that I was not in proper mindset that particular day. That's cleaning, not clearing, although I kind of like the name. We should have it be clearing. It's cleaning. Exposing, developing, charging, cleaning, fusing, transferring, processing. Why do there have to be so many different options for laser printing to have this here? And that is where you're going to be able to, there's my clearing. Let me turn off my piece here so we can see the clearing. Yeah, I didn't really do very well with my spelling there. I think you guys know, you already know all these different steps of laser printing. This is just an opportunity to berate me on my spelling, which is absolutely fine, by the way. I get much worse in my email than someone telling me there's a misspelling, because I can go back and fix the misspellings. There's usually the first person finds them, and then I go back in and I fix it. So we really can't do that live to be able to have that piece. So let's see how we did with this particular answer. And let's see, we had quite a mix of different options here. 7% said exposing, 7% said developing, 6% said charging, 53% said clearing, which can't be right because that's not even a word. 15% said fusing, 11% said transferring, and 1% said processing. So it's maybe one of those things where I was subconsciously trying to figure out how to give you the right answer with these pieces. Let's look at a laser printer and how this thing works anyway. Here's my very detailed diagram of the laser printing process. This is if we had taken the printer sideways and we cut it right in half and we're looking at a cross of that particular printer piece of it. There's so many different options. The processing piece is one where the printer is receiving the information, it's building the page in memory, then it charges and finally is setting the photosensitive drum and getting it ready to add toner to it, which is what we do during the third piece. The laser is now going through that cleaned off charged drum and is writing out in the laser exactly what you would like to have printed, because that's where the step 4 developing part is going to stick the toner to it on those spots where the laser had been. Once the developing is done, we're now going to transfer all of the toner that is now on the photosensitive drum. It's got to get on the paper. So finally, we're transferring it off to the paper to be able to get it there. And then once it's on the paper, it's a dust. It's It's this tiny little sandy, dusty thing. There's tiny little pieces of toner that need to be pressed and heated to be able to fuse them to the paper. If your fuser's broken, you'll notice the paper comes out cold and you can smear all of the toner around. But if you've fused it, it comes out nice and toasty warm, and it's now stuck to the paper. You've melted it and bonded it directly to the paper. The last piece of this, or maybe the first piece of this, depending on how you look at it, because it's just one big circle, of course, is the cleaning process. There's usually some excess toner that is still stuck to the photosensitive drum. And unless you clean it, it's going to go through this process again. And it usually rotates 3 or 4 times, sometimes more than that, to finally get a single page printed all the way from the very top to the very bottom. So if you don't clean it, you'll end up getting kind of a ghosted image on your paper that you weren't expecting to see. And you have to go in and make sure that that cleaning process, and usually there are parts in there that provide that cleaning in the drum, that's what it's doing. So if you answered clearing or D, you'd be absolutely correct. The clearing is the proper answer. And it's the cleaning. So you'd be absolutely correct. I didn't really fool very many people with that. 55% of you got that one absolutely correct. Well, as if printers wasn't a bad enough set of topics to be able to work in there, there is also questions in your A+ exam, especially the 220-802, that deal with command lines. So, of course, I put a command line question in this month, and the question is, what does the /F option of the check disk command provide? And you've got a few options available. I try to put quite a few there, so at least you can step through what those might be. And here's what they are. Let me bring these up on the screen. So does that /F option of the check disk command, does it scan and report on file system errors but not perform any fixes? Does it run check disk in safe mode? Does it fix any logical file system errors? Does it run check disk and report errors but not make any changes? Or does it locate and recover data from bad hard drive sectors? There's quite a few options there. And of course, there are a number of different options when you're working at the command line to be able to have that fixed the way you want it to be fixed. You don't always want the check disk command to do one thing or the other. Sometimes you may want to locate and recover data from bad drive sectors. Sometimes you may not want to do that because it's a time-consuming thing to have done. So that's where, whenever you start trying to figure out what do I want to run at this command line, you need to know what some of those command line options are. Remember, no answering in the chat room. If you think you know the answer, you need to go out to Socrative and answer out there to see what those are. The question again, what would that /F option do for us? It's got to be one of these things that is able to resolve that particular issue. So let's see how we answered this. I'll see in the chat room somebody had to do this last night. It's always great when you can go and figure out, yes, I have already done this piece of it. So 5% of you said it scans and reports on file system errors, doesn't fix. None of you said it runs in safe mode, probably because I made that up. There's no safe mode for check disk. The 9% of you said run check disk, report errors, not make changes. 10% said locate and recover data. But you can see 73% said this is what you would run to fix any logical file system errors. Well, did we get it right, or is this another case where we were all just piling on and trying to figure out exactly the way this works? Well, let's find out. Check disk command, there's really a number of different options. With the CompT exam, they don't tell you exactly what flags you need to know for the exam, but there are generally certain ones that we tend to use a lot. So I've added those into the mix. Check disk /F. Since we're talking about the /F command, I answer right here at the very beginning. Fixes errors on the disk. If you were doing a /R, it would locate bad sectors. It would recover readable information. It's doing effectively an F, and it's doing the R at the same time when you do a /R to be able to do that piece. There is, whenever you run this, you may find, in fact, that you're running this check disk and it says, like it says here, this volume, it can't run. The volume is in use by another process. The volume will be checked the next time the system restarts. And if you do that and restart your system, you'll see something like this pop up. So you'll see it go through the check disk process as it's booting up before it restarts the operating system. So when you restart, there may be a number of minutes, especially in a very large drive, especially hard drive. It goes through a lot to be able to work with those pieces and have it there. So if you're one of those, if you're the /F fixes those logical file system errors on the disk, if you're one of those now 71% who've jumped in and said, yes, that is fixes logical file system errors, should be absolutely correct. The F is fix, R is, I guess, recover. I guess that may be a good way to think about it. Certain ways you can go through and work those. Just don't mess them up in your head. And I think it's one of those things that if you use check disk a lot, you get very familiar with the check disk process and how it works. In fact, this is one of those things that that really comes in handy if you're studying for your 802 and you're trying to figure out what do I need to do on my 802 to really use these check disk commands and all of these commands, you might want to consider running a lab. And of course, you could set up systems in your home. You could have a Windows XP device, a Windows Vista machine, maybe even separate partitions or virtual machines for Windows 7. You would need the operating systems and licenses for all of those. And then you would need to somehow put together your own labs and step through your labs. Or you might want to consider something like Freestyle from GTS Learning. You can find out about Freestyle and get a free hour of Freestyle at professormesser.com/freestyle labs. These are labs that are able to take you through as if you're sitting right in front of this equipment to begin with. These come in really, really handy. In fact, I'll show you one. I've got the Freestyle Labs up on my system right now. I'll start the A+ Labs, and you can see what the different options are. It's as if you've got the entire virtual environment all set up with step-by-step labs and screenshots. This also includes the A+ book from GTS Learning. It also includes all of the sample exams. They have an exam generator that you can run on the GTS Learning site and step through it as well. And all of this is on here. So if you wanted to know about device management, we'll start it up. I'll show you what device management is. Here's the lab. Here's exactly the devices that are in the lab. And then you can go through and each section of the lab and start those and work with them. In fact, I'll go to step 1 right now, past the introduction, and you've got screenshots that takes you through. On this left side are the machines themselves and being able to work with them. I don't think I can even see them on my screen. Let's adjust up a bit, see if I can get to all of those and power on my machine. Let's power this one up. Let's power this one up, and let's power this one up. And so now you've effectively, just as if you had these machines sitting right in front of you, you're now starting up all of these devices, and now they will boot Windows. These are real Windows systems running on virtual machines in the cloud. So while these are running, you can go back and, of course, look at the exercises and see the things you'd like to work with. You can get an understanding of exactly what is expected of you during this process. And you can go through, of course, and see as these things are starting up exactly what you might want to use. Now, once you have a system that is starting up, you'd like to take advantage of it, you can go in. In fact, I'm going to run the one that's got the Java front end. If you've got a Windows or if you've got an HTML5 browser, you don't even need to load Java to be able to use this. And now you've got this remote desktop. And this is a Windows device. You're running a real Windows machine. You can see as I click through, you get very good response time because it's effectively just the remote desktop capabilities of it. This makes it easy. Here's a domain controller. We'll flip over to this one, and now it logs me onto the domain controller. That easy. Now you can adjust the screen, you can pop these out, you can move things around. It's very easy to use. And the pricing on Freestyle Labs is great for the pricing that we've set up is a special pricing. The only way you would get the special pricing on this is to go to professormesser.com/freestyle labs and try it yourself. If you go directly to the GTS Learning site, you don't get the good pricing. So it's a discount just for Professor Messer viewers of the study group. If you want to try it just for an hour, it's absolutely free to try. Maybe it's for you, maybe it isn't for you, but the only way you'd know is if you give it a shot. And of course, the GTS Learning folks are fantastic. They're great support. supporters of Professor Messer website and what we do, I use the GTS Learning books to build my videos. So they're nice enough to also provide some special pricing for some of the things you do as well. I love their books. They're great to step through, easy for me to use. You could tell by the video content, it's great information that's in their books and in their lab. So you may want to give those a shot. Find out more at professormesser.com/freestyle labs. Well, let's go to another question. Let's keep this party going. I've got quite a few questions to give you. Now let's go over to laptops. And the question I have is relating to, that is not the question I want to give you. I'm going to go back to this one. There's the laptop question I want to give you. It's live, folks. I think we're working this one. I think that is the one that popped up on your screen. So if you have a look, let's go through this. There we go. And which of these laptop expansion card types is available in a 35 millimeter card width? So you've got some options available to have this here. Let's see what these options might be. This would be card bus. It might be express card. It might be PC card. It could be AGX, or it could be PCIe. So one of these is going to be an expansion card type. It's going to be for a laptop. It's going to have a 34 millimeter card width. One of those is going to have it there. I think there's a number of different ways to expand capabilities of a laptop computer. This is merely one of these, and you're going to need to pick the one that is 34 millimeters wide. That is the card width for these. Now, the reason this becomes important is because if you have been sent out to grab a card that's going to provide additional capabilities for your laptop, there's going to be a number of options there. And if somebody says, I need the 34 millimeter width, you go, oh, yeah, you need one that is labeled as this particular type. So let's see how we're doing with this one. Again, no answering in the chat room. We'll go through this piece and be able to step through these. We've got a number of different options for this one as well. Some of these I gave you are very obvious for laptops. You're going to have to pick out the ones that are not specifically for a laptop computer either. So you may want to have a look at those to see. But if we see what we've answered so far, 65%, 64% said express card, 14% though said PC card, nobody chose AGX, and 19% of you said PCIe, and 4% said card bus. So if we go with the big ones here, it's probably express card, PC card, or PCIe, unless I fooled you somehow into getting the other answer. Well, let's have a look at what these different card types are. The one we're most interested in, the one where you really get these different sizes of cards, are the ones that are express cards. The express card it replaced what effectively was the older PCMCIA, which eventually was called PC card, and also replaced card bus, which was the improvement to the PCMCIA or PC card. This is effectively the newest version of this, which is Express Card. You'll notice by the diagram here, Express Card comes in some different sizes. There's a 34 millimeter wide. There's a 54 millimeter wide, which effectively can also have this piece here where it's really a smaller number of pins on the inside. They just sort of change the outside of it to fit more electronics inside of these devices. So this is one of those where when you really get into the details of working with these technologies, you do run into these scenarios where you need to understand exactly what's going to be expected of you, or at least what the different options might be if you're going to buy one of these. These form factors do come in handy, provide you a really quick way to update and use these different options on the laptop. Whenever you start working with them and using them, really comes in very handy to have that capability. I think there's a number of different ways when you start working with laptops to expand them out. Some of them you open up the bottom, but these express cards really provide a quick way to do that. So for those of you that answered express card, you answered B, you would have got that one absolutely correct. Comes in handy to have that functionality there. And I think we did a pretty good job at picking that one out. Obviously, PC card would not be the correct answer in this case, or card bus. Those are the older versions of the cards. But you also might run into a scenario where you'll see PCIe. PCIe is PCI Express, and that is for more of a desktop computer. That would not be for a laptop either. Well, let's go to another question. Finally, to the question that I popped up on the screen earlier, and now we can actually go through it. And here it is. During your Windows installation, you have the option to define file system types for your data. Which of these file systems would provide the most compatibility with other operating systems? Again, no answering in the chat room. This is one where we're going to need to answer this one in the best way that we can. So a very specific question here. Now, obviously, during the Windows installation process, you do get this option that says, what type of file system would you like to use? And you've got a very interesting choice here. Which of these file systems would provide the most compatibility with other operating systems? So this is where the options that you have might be NTFS, EFS, CDFS, Win32, or FAT32. You've got a number of different ones there. So this is where whenever you're putting something onto your storage device, you might have this system that needs to have information read from another operating system. Maybe you reboot this system and have multiple operating systems installed in different partitions on your computer. And with that dual boot or a triple boot or multi-boot capability, you may need all of those operating systems to be able to read data on any of the other partitions. So you're going to need to choose a file system that would provide the most compatibility with the other operating systems. So which one of these would this be? If we had to choose from any one of these, it'd have to be one of those to choose from. This is one of those where you've got some different options, and you really have to parse out exactly what is said in here. When I say which of these file systems would provide the most compatibility with other operating systems, we have to really go outside the scope of what we may be referring to. And I see that whenever we start looking at the answers here. Oh, so 45% of us have said NTFS, 51% of us have said FAT32, and then you've got 1 and 2% for EFS, CDFS, and Win32. So when we start looking at this, this is where you get EFS, certainly not a Windows file system, so I think we can kind of throw that EFS out the door right away. If you're running Linux, you may be running an EFS or a Unix. CDFS is a file system for CD-ROMs, so that's not the one that we're talking about either. And obviously Win32 is not a file system. That's a format, a naming convention used in Windows for that piece. So when we start looking at NTFS and FAT32, now we have to choose the one that would be most compatible with other operating systems. And by other operating systems, we mean any other operating system. We mean Linux, we mean Mac OS, we mean even other devices that don't necessarily run a traditional operating system. If all you were running was Windows, NTFS would generally be the one that was most compatible across all Windows versions. And although there are certain operating systems that can read NTFS, I think once you start digging into it and looking, most of them are read-only NTFS because it's a Microsoft technology. You don't want to corrupt that by writing to the NTFS volume. You may cause problems. So that's something you commonly see in Mac OS X. That's something you commonly see in Linux. So in this particular case, to have the most compatible file system across all of these operating systems, you would choose FAT32. You'd obviously be losing a lot of the capabilities and functionality that comes with a Windows operating system's file system, the NTFS, but it does provide you with a very quick way to have compatibility across all of those different OSs. So this is where you really get into challenges with compatibility. FAT32 gets you past a number of those challenges and solves a problem with making all of that work. So let's, when we look at file systems, that's where we really get into the details. So this is where, whenever we talk about compatibility, FAT or FAT32 is the one we're really referring to. And here again, just to reiterate, there are many operating systems that can read NTFS, but certainly not write those pieces as well. This is a bit of a challenge, of course, if you really wanted the best file system for your Windows computer that provides the most amount of security and the most functionality and flexibility in a file system. NTFS is the right selection by far. But if you have to in any way have some backward compatibility, maybe you set up a different partition and you configure that one as FAT32 and you just put your shared data in that FAT32. That might be the better option for you. We are getting near the end of our time. I'm going to also think about, oh, by the way, here's the answers with that one. I also want to bring up a few things that I even mentioned earlier in this particular study group. Before we get into those pieces, if you are studying this for your continuing education units, you might also want to send me an email. You can go to the top of the Professor Messer website under Contact Us, which is really contact me, and just put in the message your email address, your name, and tell me the code word for this one, which is FAT32. That would be our most compatible way to get a continuing education unit information back from me. I can certify that via the email and get that off to you. That would be the way we work with those pieces. If you are somebody who is studying for your A+, you're getting ready to take your A+ exam, or you've just started your A+ exam, I mentioned earlier that we wanted to have a way to be able to look through all of the objectives. And I say this on every single one of the study groups, but it's extremely important that if you are going to take the exam or study for the exam, that you download these objectives. A great place to go to get these, I should put the URL up there, is the professormesser.com/objectives. You can go to professormesser.com/something/YouTube/Facebook/Twitter/objectives, and it will take you right to the CompTIA page where you can download those objectives. These are extremely valuable. Just last night in the chat room, somebody hopped in and he says, I have 6 questions. Is this on the exam? Is this on the exam? Is this on the exam? We hold on. We'll stop you right there. Just grab the objectives. It'll tell you everything that's on the exam. You won't have to poke around to try to find all of those pieces. Let me bring up one of these so you can really understand exactly how useful having these exam objectives are. I'll pop open. Here's the 22801 set of objectives right here. And we have all of the different domains that you need to know for the 801. It gives you the authorized materials use policy, so you understand those. And here's the objectives. Just in section 1.1, configure and apply BIOS settings, and that takes you through all of the things you need to know just in that section 1.1 about BIOS. Here's section 1.2 about motherboards. Section 1.3 about RAM types. Look at all the different RAM types you need to know and what these different technologies are. Expansion cards, there's those pieces. Storage, here is flash drives and media, and just on and on. People say, what sockets do I need to know? They spell it out for you, exactly the sockets you need to know. Some of these books I've seen have 50 socket types listed. Well, the CompTIA says you only need to know these. So you may want to focus more on CompTIA's exam objectives and compare that to some of your books. Some of the books are more of a reference guide. There's a lot of information here. Yeah, it's a very large, 22 pages long, very large guide. And it is unique in the industry. If you go to a Cisco or a Microsoft or anyone else, they're not going to give you this much detail of what you need to know. They'll give you the first bullet at the top, and that's it. So we're very fortunate in many ways that we have all of these details to go through. I use this very chart to make all of my videos. So I know that all of my videos will have all of this information inside of them because I've stayed very close to what CompTIA says you should know to be able to work with those pieces. And it does come in very handy. So if you're also someone who's working with those pieces, make sure you go through these and you understand exactly what's expected of you by downloading those exam objectives, and it may save you on the exam right there for that very thing. Well, we've come to the end of a full hour. If you're watching us live, remember to stick around for the after show. I'll open up the phone lines. We'll be able to get information through there. But if you're leaving us or you're watching this in the replay, you can always follow what we're doing at the Professor Messer website at professormesser.com/Twitter. And another reminder to subscribe and join me on YouTube at professormesser.com/YouTube. Those quick reference guides, again, you can find out more about those at professormesser.com/A+SG. Again, our thanks to GTS Learning. If you'd like to try your free hour of the labs, you can go to professormesser.com/freestyle labs. And of course, we do one of these every month. And you'd like to know when the next one might be, you can go out to my calendar at professormesser.com/calendar and see what's there. In fact, next week is the Network Plus study group, where we do a similar thing with the Network Plus topics. And you can find out how to register, put your question in, and find out the exact dates and times for that as well. I want to thank everyone for joining and sending the questions and being in the chat room and having all of this information together. Could not do it without you. Thanks so much for everything you do. If you're watching us live, remember, stick around for the after show. Otherwise, we'll see you next time on the Professor Messer A+ study group. Thanks, everyone. And now it's time for the after show. That did go by fast, didn't it? It was like an hour and 4 minutes. Boom. And it's gone. At least this time I didn't have those video problems getting things going like I did last time with those pieces. That ran into a bit of a problem. Okay, let's get the show going. Let's host a show. Let's start a show. And if you're on professormesser.com/live, you can see show information. And do I have? Oh, I do, right there. Oh, there. Push the right button to begin with. So there's the studio line if you even wanted to call in as well. Of course, at this point, it would be good if I called into the studio line. So let's do this piece. Let's call. Here we go. This is one where it's hosted in the cloud. So I call in to the studio the same way you do, and then it just connects us together in my front end here. We can.
Thank you for calling Calling Studios host and call screener line.
You're welcome.
Please enter your show number and press pound.
Well, since you put it that way, I believe I will. Well, if I can, let me try. Whoops, that was wrong. That was wrong.
Show number.
Right.
Please re-enter your show number.
Okay. That's why we do when it's live, people.
Your 6-digit PIN number.
There we go. And that.
You are now in the host room.
There we go. That's now you can call up. Now, if you'd like to call up, ask any questions about anything. It's been quite a week for practically all these different technology news. There was so much happening. It became a little bit hectic with those pieces. When I was working with these, in fact, it was the one I saw this week that was the most remarkable. Let me find the exact piece of it on this. So the Superfish was the one that was really the big news from my perspective. I follow a lot of the security news, and the Superfish was the one where ASUS just decided to stick their own SSL decryption technology right on their laptops that they shipped out, and not just did it, but did it really poorly. Did it exceptionally poorly. There were failures with that technology every step of the way. So if you have an ASUS machine that you've purchased, and the ASUS site gives you the list of ASUS machines that you've purchased when and the different models of it, make sure you clean that off of there. Unfortunately, their implementation effectively made it so that anybody could send whatever they would like to your machine and pretend to be anyone they would like to. If somebody wanted to be Google, they could pretend they were Google. If somebody wanted to be Facebook, they could pretend they were Facebook. Sorry, it was Lenovo. Thank you. Why did I say ASUS? I know why I said ASUS. Let me show you. I have toys. I've got ASUS on my brain. It's Lenovo. Let me grab my my ASUS. Okay. This is why I said Asus. This is why I've got this on my brain. I have 3-4 things I want to talk about. This is my new project for tomorrow. So the new Asus Rampage 5 Extreme motherboard. There we go. Isn't that beautiful? Look at that. It's pretty. This is the new X99 chipset. Putting a new gaming computer together tomorrow. So that's why I've got Asus on the brain. It was Lenovo that did the Asus stuff's fine. Asus stuff's really great. It's the Lenovo that was such a problem with the getting those pieces together. Why would you put SSL decryption technology on a machine like that? And why would you pick an implementation of it that opened your machine up so poorly with all of those pieces? Just remarkable. So that's one of those things. It was not inexpensive. It was a little costly. I saved up my all the things I needed. This is actually for one of my kids. It's for their gaming machine, but isn't this beautiful? Because I have a YouTube channel, I can build it on the YouTube channel, and then they can use it once I'm done. But I want to do something with the new X99 chipset. This is the relatively brand new, the latest chipset from Intel, the new Sandy Bridge chipset. And it's really, really fast. I've got all the different pieces. I have a 1 terabyte SSD. It's the new Samsung 850. So again, the newest and the fastest of the SSDs. The Intel processors down there. I got some relatively fast, although full of latency, those higher speed memory chips. I just have plenty of latency in them, but I got the relatively fast set of those. And we're ready to go. We're going to be putting that together. I've got to bring in the cameras and the lights and get everything set up on that for those pieces. Because I want to record the process of using it. But I also want to have available a way to record everything. And what I'll probably do is record it sort of in real time. And then what I'll do is cut it down, add commentary after I'm finished. But I want to show the process, because the process of setting up a brand new system, installing your own motherboard, installing the CPU, installing the cooling system. I got it's a really big cooler that is completely quiet. There's a lot of nuances to it, but it's effectively the same process, whether it's an X99, whether it's 97, maybe it's an AMD chipset, doesn't matter. They all basically are the same process. And if you just take it nice and slow and go through, it works out great. So one of the things, I probably won't do it in real time live, but I will be recording everything and editing it down and having it there. It's one of those that will be, and I'll probably do it in pieces so we can talk about all the different components, why I chose those, and how they're going to fit together. We'll do another one where we put the motherboard in. We'll do another one where we add the power supply. We'll do another one where we add the CPU, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, with those pieces. Comes in handy with those. Yeah, I think it's going to be a lot of fun to look at, play around with. And it's easier than you might think to put together your own computer these days. The process of doing it's a lot of fun. First, I'll bring my kids in. We'll be able to do it together. So that part's kind of neat. And then, of course, having the new system, of course, is probably the coolest part. So you've got a nice, fast machine that you can now use to be able to do that. I had to get a full-size case. Usually I get a mid-size tower. I got a full-size tower because of the style that this will be my daughter's computer that she wanted to be able to use. So there's a lot of that there. The video for that is something that obviously I'll be recording tomorrow, and I'll probably be editing throughout the week. So I hope that it will be available relatively quickly to have that there. Comes in handy to be able to work with those pieces. Well, there was a lot that we did on setting up and getting this particular system available and ready to go. I really did everything in PC Part Picker. If you haven't used PC Part Picker, it is fantastic. I think I have my PC Part Picker login. I can at least show you what this is. If you haven't been on PC Part Picker lately, in the last week, they have updated all of their part front ends. Let's see if I can show this. Here we go. So there's PC Part Picker, and I've got some lists that, what does my list now show? Do I have a system build in here? It's probably this one. Nope, I have one that I saved. They changed their format on this. Is this the one that I have in here? So I think this is the one that I put in here. I didn't choose the 840, it's the 850, so this one isn't completely done. This was the slower one I put together. This is pretty close. The Cooler Master, fully modular power supply, so there's not a lot of cables everywhere. The nice 144 hertz monitor. So this is one where here's the cooler is a big one from Be Quiet. Love the name, Be Quiet. So that's the piece that we're putting in there. So this should be a lot of fun to have that there. I tried to get parts that were a little bit off the beaten path with some of these. With the the older chipsets, Intel used to put the CPU coolers in the CPU package. You buy the CPU and the cooler was in there. And with the latest, I understand they aren't doing that. But even if they were, I think I like the idea of the super quiet part. The specifications are amazing. This is from 13.2 to 26 decibels. So it's very, very quiet, very, very quiet noise level with that. It's not the quietest you can get, but it's still pretty good with what you're putting together. I think there's a lot of nice things to add to that mix. So that's one of those things. For those of you that are watching on the replay, you see the number that's up. You can, of course, call in live to ask any questions that might be there. But if you are watching this on the replay, you can call that number and ask a question of what's going on. I think there's a message you'll get. You can leave a message there, and then I can replay it on the next study group with that piece as well. There is a lot that I put together. In this case, this will be all air cooled. It will not be liquid cooled for those pieces. And if you are liquid cooling, you may have to periodically change out the coolant that you have in there. You usually don't have to do that very often, though, for those pieces. You'd have to really have it in there a long time and use your computer a lot to have to worry about that too much. I forget what the recommendations are. Are they 6 months, a year, something like that? I haven't used water cooling in so long. The liquid cooling I just try to stay away from if at all possible. Although I can certainly appreciate wanting to liquid cool everything just in the lack of noise from a fan running. And of course, they're very effective for liquid cooling. I just worry about the liquid part of the liquid cooling. I do not have faith in myself that I'm going to install it properly, and then I've now got coolant all over the place. So that's my biggest problem working with the cooling systems. I think that's what I'm trying to avoid when I start working on them. This is these Haswell processors are amazing. Very nice improvement to those pieces. So I'm looking forward to working on these latest Intel processors. I get to try them out, so it's kind of nice to have the toys there available to work with. There is a lot of people going back and forth in the chat room about classes. Do I take an A+ class? Do I do everything online? There are really advantages and disadvantages to both. I like a classroom environment. I think it's really nice to have a classroom environment that everybody can sit down, talk together about some of these topics, grab a computer, pull it open. When you're talking about CPUs, you're talking about chipsets, you're talking about hard drives and SSDs, you're talking about SATA connections. Well, let's look at it. Everybody's crowd around. We'll open up this computer. Here's the SATA connection. Here's the cable you would use. Pass the cable around. There's some really nice ways to take advantage of a classroom environment. On the other hand, classroom environments can be costly, especially the ones that are 5 to 10 day classes. For A+, I have no idea how you cram everything into 5 to 10 days. I have no earthly idea on how that's going to actually work. I guess you really have to know your content and then step into doing this. but a lot of the community colleges and technical colleges will have A-plus courses, and you can take over a number of months, 3 months or so. They go through everything you need to know. They're very low cost, and at the end of it, they even often will have discounted, like educational discounted vouchers, which are extremely economical. We're talking well under $100 to take the class in some cases. So that's one of those where that I think makes a lot of sense if you're somebody who really likes that classroom environment. But online, we try to put everything online. All the videos I have, for instance, you can watch for free online. There's a lot of other content out there as well. And if you have your own computer and you're someone who is very self-directed and can study, and you know every day you're going to be working on this and you have a plan to make that happen, that's certainly something you can do for an A-plus certification easily. It's not like you need anything extra. You don't have to have a supercomputer available. You don't have to have like a chemistry. You would have to have a whole lab set up with tons of chemicals. In this case, maybe having a computer will help you, but you don't even necessarily have to have a computer to get your A-plus certification. It certainly helps. That's a good example, though, of how you can make those comparisons. The costs on these 5-day classes from third parties are in the thousands of dollars. So it's not something you can easily jump into to make that happen. I think that's where when I start looking at that, it helps. Another question that came in was, will colleges and universities give you credit for having your A-plus certification? And in some cases, absolutely. Local community college here, if you have your A-plus or Network Plus or Cisco certification, there are certain classes where you get those 3 credits. Just by having the certification, you've now got the credits available. Now, you can't obviously do that for all of the classes that are in their curriculum, but obviously if they have a class that teaches you everything you need to know for the A-plus, and you're already showing up with your A-plus certification, they just give you the 3 credits. It's fantastic. So it makes it easy if you're already someone who has the experience, you've already stepped through the certification, but now you want to work on some other parts of your education. Maybe that helps get you jump started right in there. Check with your university, your college, your technical school, and find out what particular things they need to be able to do that, because that can really come in handy if you're already in school. Maybe even if you're in school, look into this. You may be able to get some great credits very, very easily if you already have your certification. Comes in handy. And I've seen that with A-plus, Network Plus, Cisco certifications. There's probably others, Microsoft certifications. I'll bet some places will do that as well. Comes in handy for those too. All right, time to take a sip. This is one of those things. Okay, so somebody also in the chat room is talking about taking going for a job interview. This came up in the chat room also this week as somebody went to a job interview. It's a technical job interview, and they feel like they didn't do very well on the interview. This is one of those things where you really, really have to sit down and think about what you're going to be asked for this particular job. I come from a networking and security background, and whenever we were interviewing brand new systems engineers or potential systems engineers for security products, I would start with simple questions. There was one SE who was really good at saying, she'd start with, tell me what you know about ARP. And he'd just tell me everything you know about ARP. And the person would explain ARP. Okay, tell me what you know about other types of ARP. What about proxy ARP? And they go through that process. What about a gratuitous ARP? Tell me about a gratuitous ARP. And they would go from there. And from the answers, because ARP is a relatively basic, fundamental technology. You have to know ARP to be able to do anything with networking, and certainly to do anything with security, especially as you get into proxy ARPs and gratuitous ARPs. Now you're listening to what someone's saying, and you're trying to get more information from them. And my recommendation was to always have a story. If somebody is sitting you down for a help desk position, they may have a test you have to take. Well, that's easy. Well, you have to go through the test and answer the questions. They may be asking very broad questions. Tell me about the time when you had to install Windows on a large number of machines, how you did that, what things you ran into that were a problem, and how you resolved those. You should think in your mind, there should be an answer to that. you also don't have to necessarily take the premise of the question and answer it exactly. They're really looking to find out what you know technically. So you could say, well, large scale for me wouldn't be very big, but I did work at this environment where we had 5 of them. We didn't need to roll them out using some of Microsoft's management consoles. You can reference how you might want to do it. Instead, I set up a build. We imaged it using this imaging software. We set them all out. One thing that we didn't take into account was changing the licensing. So we changed licensing and we rolled them out. It was great. Those are things you didn't necessarily answer the large scale question they had for you, but you were able to talk about your experience in using the operating system, why you chose one method of implementing over another, which gives them the idea that yes, you do understand the process there. And for someone who I've interviewed a lot of people for help desk, for networking, for security through the years. Some people just have no idea anything about technology. And for some reason they got through the gauntlet and got to a point where we were doing a face-to-face, or in some cases, it's usually a telephone interview, even a Skype interview these days. And they just tell me what you know about ARP. ARP, I don't know about the ARP. Did you say ARF? Like a dog? So that's situations where you do want to have stories available. And think about all the things you've done with your computer, even if it's something you've done. If you've ever had to remove malware from your parents' computer, we've all had to remove malware from our parents' computer. What do I mean if? There were certain technologies you used, certain packages, pieces of software that you used to remove the malware. And what type of malware was it? Oh, I found out she had this kind of malware, and tell about the research that you took into identifying that malware. You found out that it said that the machine had encrypted data, but in reality, it was fake. It did not encrypt the data. So we were able to remove the malware. We didn't lose any data. And here's how we did that. And talk about the programs you used. Oh, I used Malwarebytes, and I used Tron, and I used this, and I used that, and I used the other. So take advantage of those ideas of what people are doing. And you might be able to also really get an idea of how to better have that conversation during the interview process. Let's go to some of the phone calls. Got people in the queue. I'm sorry for talking so much. Let's go to the 786 area code. Are you there, caller?
Professor?
Yes. Who's there? What's your
Hello?
name?
Hi, this is Rob Sandberg, first-time caller, long-time listener.
All right. Yes, I've seen you in the chat room.
Everything. Okay, yeah, listen, I'm so nervous. I can't, I have such a profound respect for the live show that you're doing now. It's beyond me. Listen, I just had one question. What was the name that you uploaded to PC Part Picker so I can check out your build?
I'd like to see the build. The build is not complete on here. It's complete. It's certain parts of it are not correct, but where's my completed build? Let's find out. You think you're nervous. I have to make this stuff work every time. Let's see.
It's amazing.
I will tweet it out today because I have a part list here that is not saved. And it's one that I do need to make. I don't even think I made it public, but I'll put the part list in there and I will tweet it out and stick it on Facebook and Google Plus later today so you can see it. So you can see all the different things we got for it. Plus I can confirm that's what I bought for it, and I'll make sure I have those pieces because I have everything in now. It's sitting in my studio behind me. It's actually behind the desk back there, all ready to go. I literally have to get a table and a tablecloth and change the lights and move things around in here just so I can record it. But I will make sure I make those available for you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Professor. Keep up the good work.
Thanks for calling. I appreciate it.
Okay. Thank you.
There's another call in the queue. We can jump to that. Yeah, I'll make sure I get the PC part picker because I'm looking over my PC part picker list, and there's some things I just have wrong on there, like the Samsung, and I did not get the 970. I got the GTX 980. So I'll update this and I'll make sure it's available to everyone. I'm sorry it won't be in the video, but I'll make it on the. I keep saying I'll make it in the video pieces there. For that. So let's go to the 623 area code. I think it's the 623 area code. Are you there, caller? What's your name?
Hi, yes, this is Allie.
Hey, Allie, what can we do for you today?
Well, I have actually had a sound issue that I'm completely dumbfounded. It just recently started, within the last week, and it's on a laptop.
Okay.
And it'll be, my playback is going, and then all of a sudden it like makes a buzzing sound, it freezes, and then it continues to go.
Huh.
It's not constant. It's more of an intermittent thing. And so my first thought was, is it a driver issue? So I was trying to go through that and uninstall and reinstall. That didn't solve my problem. And then somebody had said, well, what about a codec issue? And I was like, well, I don't know, but I don't even know how to access that.
Right.
So I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
I think you were thinking the right idea, that maybe something in the driver got corrupted, but audio drivers are generally very simple. It's a single sys file. It's only one single file. It's not like video drivers. When video drivers are bad, there's these intermittent problems and you have to update the video driver, and it's an ordeal. It's a big install package and it installs everything. Audio driver, it usually works or doesn't work. Although I've certainly had times where I've installed the wrong audio driver and had it sort of work, but not really well. Very similar to the situation you're talking about, intermittent problems. And then I realized, I installed the wrong one, went back to the manufacturer's site, found the right driver and installed it. But generally it's one of those things where it either works or it doesn't. And I think you've got the right, you've gone out now and confirmed that you've got the right driver. It's loaded and installed properly on your computer. So that doesn't seem to be the issue either. It seems to be more of something else, randomly, it seems, conflicting with what's going on there. I would not generally think it would be a codec issue, because the codec is the compressor decompressor. It's the thing that takes that binary format, converts it into a format that we can view and hear and put it on the screen. And if your codecs are not correct, you will either not see video, you will not hear audio, or one of those things will just be garbled all the time. A codec either going to work or it's not going to work. And if you're using a source of information, a source of data that's good, it probably is not going to be your codec. Is it in YouTube videos? Is it in games? Is it in listening to MP3s, or is it just everything?
It's everything. My son was on one of his kid websites playing a game. It happened on my on the YouTube playback, and then I went into even try a local file, and it was the same thing. When
you play the local file, is it a separate application using like VLC or Windows Media Player or something of that sort?
Yes, the media player. So
at least you've confirmed now it's not just in the browser, it's also in other applications as well. It affects different kinds of data. So you can almost point to the operating system now as being something is now in the general operating system. I can't point to a single application and say, oh, my browser's messed up or my media player's messed up, because it sort of happens in both of those. There is a couple of things you can do. These are annoying problems, extremely difficult to troubleshoot, but something else on your computer is now conflicting with this. And it sounds like from the description of this, it's not stopping it. It's not crashing it, but it's having this little hiccup, this little skip, or this little, is it a stutter? Is it going away completely? What is it? It'll go, and then it'll freeze the frame, and then it'll continue going. What did that do again?
It almost sounds like an electrical interference.
What was
me, if I had to describe it?
What was the noise again?
It's like
there you go.
And then it freezes.
You can't get better than that, people. There's the description, but you are noticing it's stuttering and freezing and making that noise as if it hit a particular audio piece and kind of stuck there for a moment and did the horn and then kept going. I wonder if there isn't something else running that. First, there's a couple of things. It could be bad hardware. It could be that the audio system is going bad. That's very unlikely, but that's of course always a possibility. It could be driver related, but I think you've resolved that by reloading the driver. So I don't think that's necessarily your problem either. I think something else on the computer is creating a conflict with your video being able to play properly. Something is grabbing the CPU and grabbing or maybe even grabbing the threads that Windows is using and using that for a moment. And then when it finally releases it, you're able to have it play there. And so the things that the chat room is even thinking along the same lines as I am, I immediately worry about malware, and I want to do a malware check. So the malware, an anti-malware scanner would be a great choice. And just to run malware bytes would be a great thing to just a sanity check at, let me give you the malwarebytes.org, O-R-G. Malwarebytes will give you a wealth of scanning there. It's really designed just for malware to make sure there's nothing else running. It can tell you things that aren't necessarily a problem. So you don't want to go too far into this. You don't want to get rid of things like your cookies. It tells you, oh, you've got cookies in your browser. Cookies are fine. Let's not worry. Cookies are not our problem. Our problem is something more invasive in our operating system, and it can give you a nice scan and at least be able to tell you, I've got, this is all good or this is all bad. And Malwarebytes is a very good one to use. It has a very good track record, and it finds a huge percentage of these pieces of malware out there. But I'm not completely convinced that it's malware myself. One of the things that I sometimes will do is I want to see what else is running at the same time. And so one of the pieces that helps me a lot, and now we're getting into really detailed analysis of what's going on. I want to see at the very easiest way, performance monitoring or really process monitoring. That is one of the best ways to really see exactly what's running on the computer, to try to close out everything that's running on your system that you don't possibly need. And I'm trying to find the one that I will use. Normally, the Windows Process Monitor is a good one to try. You can, of course, right mouse click on the bottom display, on the bottom taskbar in your Windows, and start up your task or process monitor. That would at least show you different things, but that's more. Now you're getting into having to decipher the operating system. And it becomes a very difficult thing to see what's happening. But one thing you can look for at a very high level is to run this process monitor. And I want to find the one I use, because I even download a different one from Microsoft and run it, because it gives me more visibility into what's going on. And it's called Process Monitor. And here we go. There's some screenshots of it. And I know you can't see that on the line. Process Monitor is one that I will often sometimes use, because it will create an enormous, and I mean enormous, log of everything that is happening in Windows. It will scare you with the amount of information it's able to provide on the screen. But Process Monitor is one that logs everything, so that if you can watch it going by and it makes the buzzing noise and you can stop the Process Monitor, you can go back through there to see, was something going crazy at that point? What was running at that very second that caused everything else to be put on hold? Another great sysinternals utility, Google this one, well, Google Microsoft sysinternals and Process Monitor, also Process Explorer, which is a replacement for the Explorer that's on your the process view, the task viewer that's in your Windows already, and it provides a little bit more visibility. That's another great one to use, because you can, there it is. So you can go through and kind of watch the percentages, watch the CPU utilization, and you may be able to catch it when it's doing that particular buzzing noise to find out what's happening with that piece. Why are we seeing that come through? What piece of that is causing the issue? And I think if you use one of those two along with a malware scan, you may be able to narrow down what's working and what's not working, and be able to see it as it's popping up in your computer.
Awesome. That's great information.
That's a very long, involved thing, and it may require a lot of extra legwork to understand exactly what's going on in Process Monitor and Process Explorer. But after you go through that, I assure you, you'll be able to understand a lot more about what's happening in the operating system, and be able to perhaps catch this the next time something bad happens on your computer.
That's great. Well, thank you so much for giving me exposure to some new tools to explore. I appreciate that.
Yeah, and let us know how it goes. I'd like to hear what the answer to this one's going to be, if any.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thanks for calling.
Bye-bye.
There's those tools themselves. I love running Process Monitor, love running Process Explorer. I had a system that when you booted, it took forever. Like, it would go through the boot process and then stop for like 90 seconds. And I mean stop, like it wasn't just showing a blank screen and it was slow to get going. I mean, nothing happened. The hard drive stopped flickering. CPU, nothing was happening for like a 90-second period. And I was able to use Process Monitor to have it run and see what's going on during that process, and then notice that it was trying to reference a part of a registry that it didn't have rights to access. For some reason, the registry permissions had gotten really messed up, and it kept, whatever application this was, kept trying. The entire operating system was waiting, and it would wait until it timed out after 60 or 90 seconds or whatever it was, and then everything continued to run. And all I did was go into the registry and say, okay, now you have access to that area. Boom. Now suddenly 90 seconds during the startup process was fine. There was no problem at all to get that running. Very useful to have that there. And even if you don't have a problem, load those up and have a look at them. They're fantastic utilities. Let's go to the 949 area code. Hi, caller, are you there? What's your name?
Hey, Professor. My name's Justin. I'm actually in your chat room
Hey,
right
Justin.
now.
Well, welcome.
Hey, thank you. I'm calling because I have kind of a burning question, and I think you have probably mentioned it before, but what is do you focus on security? Is that what you do, or?
I mean, what I do, you mean like when I'm not on this camera?
I'm sorry, yeah, I should have been more clear. Yeah, your profession, your job, like what do you focus on?
Let me give you the long version of this because this does come up from time to time. Might as well start at the beginning. I went to college and at Florida State University in Tallahassee and got a degree in business management. And although I look very, very young, at that time, personal computers were just starting to be a thing. I think the first 386 chip had just come out when I was in college. So it was one of those things where PCs were not something everyone had in their home. My now wife, Mrs. Professor Messer, even mentions that she remembers coming to visit me at college, and I had a computer, I think it was an IBM XT or an AT, in my apartment.
Wow.
And she's like, what do you need this for? Why does anybody need a computer? That's stupid. So of course we were meant to be.
Right.
And so I got my degree in business management, which really had nothing to do with computers. But I was really interested in computers. Part-time worked at the computer center at Florida State, which at that time had supercomputers. There was a liquid nitrogen-cooled supercomputer. It was really a nice high-tech environment to use because they did amazing modeling of weather and hurricanes, and still do. It's quite the remarkable learning environment for computing. I just was not focused on computer science. It really wasn't my thing. I wasn't a very good programmer, so I stuck to the management side. But right after school, I got a job working in South Miami, literally as a cable delivery person. I delivered printers. I swapped out displays. It was the ultimate in technical grunt work, but allowed me to meet a lot of companies in South Florida. And I eventually left that and started working at a help desk for an insurance company. So it was that typical, people call it was a corporate help desk. So I didn't always have, the phone thing in my ears. It was more of somebody called and says, I can't connect to the mainframe. I'm having a problem printing to this laser printer. I can't connect to the Novell server. I'm having a problem with Windows. So I would go to their desk. I would stand up and go over to that part of the building or multiple buildings and do that piece. But that was great from a help desk perspective because you kind of got the use of that. I moved from there to work at a VAR in a value-added reseller in Hollywood, Florida, which is still down there in South Florida, where I was a reseller or representative of third-party products. So of 3Com switches, of Cisco routers, of Microsoft Windows. And so I would implement those and get them running in people's environments. I moved from there to instead of being in a VAR, I went to work for one of the manufacturers. I went to work for Network General, working in with their sniffers. That got me into networking. You really had to understand the packets. We made the sniffer product, so you had to understand how the networking piece was operating. So that was my progress. I kind of started with the operating system. I moved into the network piece of it, and I learned as much as I can about network. And when you work for the manufacturer of the company that makes the sniffer, you really do get to understand what's happening down on the wire or on the fiber with Ethernet, with at the time token ring, with ATM, with gigabit Ethernet, with those other WAN technologies. That becomes really interesting at that level. And I think if you're going to get into where I eventually ended up was network security. I went from there to work for, at the time it was a startup, was Palo Alto Networks, a next generation firewall company. And that was about 6.5 years ago. As a systems engineer. So I would go to people that did not have a next generation firewall and say, what are you running? Well, we have proxies. We want to stop malware on the wire. We want to do SSL decryption. We want to block applications. We want to allow Twitter, but not allow people to post to Twitter, or we want to open everything, but just protect ourselves. And that's what I did for about 6.5 years. And then recently, and that's where I got the security piece of it, a lot of the security. Before that, I had written a book on Nmap. That sort of led me into security. I think if someone wants to get into security, learn as much as you can about the network and learn about what's going across the network and how it runs across the network. Amazing visibility of what you can understand, because then you can apply that to how to protect and understand what's going over the network. And I mentioned when somebody said they're interviewing for a job, and we would say, tell me about ARP. It was the security role we were asking about. We started with the networking, and then if they got through that, we talk about IPsec, we talk about SSL decryption, we talk about proxies, we talk about intrusion prevention, we talk about URL filtering, we talk about, you just kept going into the security side of things. They're all associated with networking. It's a huge networking piece. And recently I left that position to do this full time. So now I went from working at a startup, that high tech, and going to the biggest data centers in the world, to sitting in this room and making YouTube videos. So it's a little bit of a shift. It's a bit of a change, but that's kind of the whole. That just took you through, 30 years of whatever that was, 25 years of whatever that was to get to this point.
Well, that's simply amazing. It's amazing where life will take you.
I really had no idea. And a lot of these things I would go into were bad decisions. A lot of the places I mentioned, some were the best decision I could have ever made. Some were the worst decision I could have made at the time. But you don't know until you get there. And one of the benefits, I think, of IT and technology in general is that if you're somewhere and it's not working out, there are a lot of other jobs out there doing this kind of thing, even if it's not something you are necessarily know about. I started with configuring Windows. Well, that kind of leads you into networking. That kind of leads you into security. I couldn't have gone from that direct route from Windows to security, or really delivering printer cables to next generation firewalls. No. It's a path. And you never know. You find an interest and you go with it.
Yeah, that's amazing. Well, I have a huge respect for what you do. As I know everybody else, at least here in the chat room, and anyone who listens to you, I know you're doing what you love, and that's huge. So I mean, regardless of how long it may have taken to get to this point, it doesn't really matter. And the reason, obviously the reason I'm asking about security is I'm definitely interested in that. And I work for a retail company. They're fairly large, and I look at their IT infrastructure. I'm actually somewhat friends with their IT director. And I can see flaws in the system, and I don't know. It doesn't surprise me that when you were sitting down and interviewing people for a specific position, that they would have no idea. When you ask about ARP, they would have no idea what you're talking about. It's amazing how people kind of get through that that blockade that's up in the technology world, and sort of make it to that point, and then just have no idea what you're talking about. I don't understand how they get there, but either way, there's flaws in any system. But I think it's amazing. Just looking at a big company that I work for, just seeing some of the huge security flaws. I mean, we've seen. I listen to Steve Gibson a lot. I know I've heard you reference
Security Now, right?
Yeah, I love that show, and I listen to it all the time. And it's amazing to me. Did you know that banks that have been having all these security issues, they don't, it's not in their best interest to let the public know about these security issues, but we probably have a more secure network at my job, as far as, keeping employees from opening emails and that type of thing. with nefarious content, and as opposed to a bank. I mean,
Right.
some of these banks have gotten, you know what I mean? Like some of these banks have gotten hacked into simply because somebody was able to get into the system, monitor it, and send one of the bank employees an email message that looked like it was from one of their fellow employees, and they click on that link, and then sure enough, they're in the system. So it's just amazing to me. It's like, really? You guys don't, you're a bank.
It's all too
But
common.
regardless.
There's so many different vectors, though, for this bad stuff to come in that, and I've been to the biggest companies, at least on the eastern United States, and to some of the biggest data centers and talking to their security people in these very, very large companies. And it's a constant battle to figure out how to get through this stuff. When I started with Palo Alto Networks 6.5 years ago, Twitter didn't exist. So now Twitter obviously is enormous, and there's a huge security problem or security vector, a possible security issue with allowing people to click links in a Twitter on their desktop, their corporate desktop. That's an issue we didn't have 6.5 years ago. It didn't exist. And now, of course, and you mentioned it, when the bad guys get in, it's now very directed. They go to LinkedIn, they find someone's name, they find somebody else in the company, they send a fake email to that person with the link that looks like it's inside. They get access to the computer. It's almost invisible. How in the world is anybody going to catch that unless you've really thought through what they do? And like the latest people that have got into, going back over a year, going to Target, going into the UPS stores, going into Home Depot, going into all of those throughout these just the past 12 months. And I know because I was affected by every single one of those. Oh, and the latest one, the healthcare one. So all of those.
And I was affected by that.
Yeah.
I was affected by that one, the healthcare one.
Those last four, I was hit specifically. They got my stuff's out there. My credit card is out there. My contact information's out. It's out there. You can go to a website and buy it. Maybe not mine specifically, but you could find for a zip code, a type of card. I will pay $15 for that card number. So there is, but when they got in and they sat there for months. It's not one of these
monitoring.
things. Yeah, they just sit there. They find out where everything is. The Home Depot one was really interesting, in fact, because with Home Depot, if you've ever been in the Home Depot stores here in the U.S., they have checkout lanes where there's a human being who will grab your things. They will scan them. They will process your card, and off you go. And then they have self-checkout lanes where you, I guess for free, you go up and you scan it yourself and you put in your credit card number and it spits out a receipt, and there's somebody kind of monitoring multiples of those. Well, they had named their self-checkout devices, which are their Windows boxes, they had named them self-checkout 1, self-checkout 2. It was obvious that it was a self-checkout server, but the point of sale systems that a human being uses, they had a completely different name that had nothing to do with point of sale. It was some obfuscated or some series of letters and numbers that meant nothing. Well, the bad guy sat in there and said, well, we don't know where the point of sale systems are, but whoa, there's some that are called self-checkout. Let's load the malware on those. Right. And they load the malware, it spit the credit card numbers out, and off they were going. That's absolutely phenomenal. But how in the world do you stop something like that? It's not just firewalls, it's not just anti-malware. And now there's even new technologies for antivirus, anti-malware that are not looking for signatures of the malware. It's looking for what the malware is doing. Because on a Windows machine, there are 20-something ways that you could infect a system with a buffer overflow, with an interrupt request, you can go through all of these ways to infect. And now what they're trying to do is, instead of having signatures for malware that you're not going to know about anyway until 5 days after the malware's out, let's stop the basic functionality of malware and how it infects these machines. So I think over the next year, you're going to see a lot of newer technologies arrive as they mature that are going to be up sort of one level up, so that it's stopping the malware, completely unknown malware, but it's able to stop it because it knows that malware attacks the system in certain ways. Really remarkable. And yet another thing that all of these big companies have to implement. And if you're the larger company you are, the longer it takes to implement this, because there's more applications to test, there's more systems to deploy to, there's problems you're going to run into, there's incompatibilities. it's an enormous challenge. And in many ways, I'm happy that I'm sitting here able to do live streams and make videos rather than fighting them, because those guys really have it tough.
Yeah, absolutely. They absolutely do. And that's not to. I'm not trying to downplay the incredibly difficult job that those folks have. I just think that it's astonishing the lack of proactiveness in security in some of these companies, where it should be the number one focus, especially with banks and with people's sensitive private information. But my other question, Professor, just not to go on too much longer and getting into the weeds, was you had mentioned something about a Lenovo security flaw with some Lenovo hardware. And the reason I'm asking is because I was thinking of purchasing a Lenovo Think server and using that as kind of my base of operations in my little lab that I got going on. And so I didn't quite catch what you were talking about because I got in kind of late into the chat room. So
what you want to Google for, and this is in the past week,
right.
What people have found, Lenovo stopped shipping this in January, but on systems going back to a few months into last year, on their new laptops, they were shipping a piece of software that we call Superfish. And what it did, it was effectively a SSL decryption proxy. It would take any requests made to a web server and it would make the requests on your behalf. It would decrypt that information. Let's say you were going to your healthcare provider or you were going to buy something on Amazon. It would decrypt that information so that that software could see it. It would, as Lenovo says, inject ads into it, re-encrypt it, and then send it off to your browser so that you could see what was going on. So they were effectively breaking SSL. People call it SSL decryption. I guess you could call it a man in the middle. It wasn't necessarily an attack, but it was software that they had loaded on these systems to be able to do that. Well, it's bad enough that a manufacturer has taken it upon themselves to get in the middle of your encrypted web communication. And I guess you could have an argument on whether that's legitimate or not. But unfortunately, they were using software from a third party to do this. And that software had some pretty significant flaws associated with its implementation. One of the things, and not to talk about too far into the weeds, but I really need to do a video on SSL decryption and how it works, because what they did is on all of their laptops, they installed into the Windows operating system, into your browsers, their own trusted certificate authority, or their certificate authority that they had. These certificate authorities... There's
no way to get rid of that, right? I'm sorry to interrupt. There's no way to get rid of that.
You can absolutely get rid of it. And in fact, one of the things that Microsoft did yesterday is that if you're running Microsoft's antivirus, it finds it as a virus now and removes it.
Oh, wow.
And I think everybody's going to do that, because not only did they implement it in this way, they put the same private key to provide. You have to build a new encryption key for every session you're making to all these web servers. They put exactly the same private key on everybody's computer, which meant if you had access to the private key, you knew its passphrase, assuming that it was passphrase protected. In this case, it was. If you had access to your private key, you could effectively decrypt everybody's traffic on anybody's Lenovo computer. And interestingly enough, the passphrase for the private key that was being used for this was the name of the company that created the software, all in lowercase. It was exceptionally easy to find, primarily because it had to see that in the software to be able to use the private key. And the poor company that did this, that implemented this in this way, has now gotten denial of service attacks all week. You can't even hit their website.
I would imagine, right?
Yeah, everybody's pretty angry. What's even worse is that a researcher has found, the story keeps getting weirder. In the last day or two, a researcher has found that you really don't even need their private key. You could build your own key, sign it yourself. You won't even need the CA from there to be on it. And you can change one of the options tags that's within the certificate to have the name of the company that you're sending through. Because if you created your own certificate and said, I'm Google, your browser's going to pop up and go, no, you're not. I just checked. You're not Google. Well, if you add google.com to this additional options field in the certificate, the software interprets that as being really from Google and passes it through to the browser without any type of error whatsoever. So you can build the certificates yourself. You don't even need the private key with the really bad passphrase associated with it. That's how bad this software has been implemented. This story can't possibly get any worse, but I'm sure it will. I'm sure the lawsuits are inbound any moment now. But the biggest issue, of course, is now you have all of these Lenovo computers that are already out there in the wild. Some of them, hopefully many of them, will be fixed, cleaned, repaired, removed, or whatever from the Superfish software. But of course, there will be some that will not. And ultimately, those machines are at risk for a man-in-the-middle attack very, very, very easily. Just find one in a coffee shop, and you can now pretty much send whatever you would like into that machine, have people see what you want them to see on their screen. It is frightening in the poor implementation of that software. They stopped putting the software on there last month, so new laptops from Lenovo will not have this software on them. And it's not something that's hidden. It's not a rootkit like Sony did those many years ago. It's something that's very easy to see. You can find the certificate authority in your list. You can see the software. You can remove it. And some software is automated. I think Lenovo has finally introduced or created a piece of software that will remove it now. So they recognize, their CTO said, man, they screwed up.
Yeah.
Just a bad scene. That was a bad one.
That's amazing.
There are implementations of SSL decryption that you find all the time in large environments. They run on firewalls. They run on URL filtering and proxies that are controlled, they're safe, they're managed by security professionals. You can't possibly get access to the private key. You can't possibly have these types of problems. They're scanning to prevent the malware from coming through to your system, and that's exactly where the SSL decryption should be, not on a laptop and certainly not on a third party to decide what you happen to see in your browser.
Right, and then because you're trusting now a third party to make sure that this is working correctly, obviously, and that's I think that's amazing.
I don't know if they were planning to put Lenovo ads on my Amazon screen or if they were planning to put Google ads and make a few bucks on the side. I have no idea, but it was just a very bad idea, very poorly implemented.
Yeah. What I've learned, I think, is that anytime you see something that just really doesn't make any sense, there's usually always money involved somewhere along the line.
Somewhere along the line.
Yes. Yeah. So, hey, Professor, I'm going to let you go. It was amazing talking to you, and thank you so much for what you do. I was saying on the chat room, I remember when I was first looking for the A+ and where to start, and when I found you, it was like a light bulb went off. So it was. Thank you very much for what you do.
So glad to hear it. Thank you so much. Appreciate the call.
All right. Thank you.
There is. I keep saying, I said this before, I need to do a video on SSL decryption just on how it's done properly and the story about how it was implemented in Lenovo's Superfish software was remarkable. It's one for the ages, for sure, no question. We have hit the 2-hour mark, and my voice knows it. It's one of those times where I think I know exactly when is it going to be a good time to close out the study group, just because I can't talk anymore. It's time for me to actually close it up. I want to thank everybody for attending. Thanks for being on the live chat. Thanks for the Q&A that we were able to do today. If you liked what you had today and you're studying for your Network Plus, you'd like to join us, we're doing another one of these next weekend for Network Plus, where I have all new questions with all the things associated with networking. We're going to drill down into those pieces. I'll open up the phone lines after that one as well. We'll talk about those. Hopefully, I'll also have that video up of the build of the computer, because if I don't, my daughter will kill me. I've got to get the computer done. So look for that this week. And always, if you have any questions, you can always send me an email or send me a note by clicking on the Contact Us at the top. Send me a tweet. I'm always around somewhere. Thanks for joining us, everyone. We'll see you next time.